Welcome to the AFR Saints channel, where we provide you daily content on your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to leave your comments below and smash that like button. Hudec. I wanted to start by asking about Taysom Hill. I don't know with that game where else you could start, but what was it, or was it something specific that Seattle was doing that allowed Taysom to have the type of day he did?
I think it was just taking more advantage of the fact that they haven't really used him that much this season. I don't think Seattle was really expecting him because you only threw one passing play, and you hear the announcers on his last rushing touchdown say, there's no running backs out there. There's no wide receivers out there. I don't know what Seattle thinks is going to go on in that play. So I think it's less what Seattle was showing, because I think we all make the joke that everyone and their grandmother can figure out what Taysom's going to do. I think the blocking by the offensive line was a lot better this week than we've seen really all season. But I think just his vision and decisiveness, really as a running back and nothing else, is really high up there. And it just seemed like he sees holes a lot quicker than, for example, Mark Ingram's able to see them. They haven't ran any draw plays this season, and they ran 3 between Hill and Kamara, and were 100% success on that. And it was an average gain of 12.3 yards per play. And we saw a lot of counter plays as well, just really using him against Kamara more than we've seen. I think that really is key. It reminds me of when Taysom started in 2020, and it was the Atlanta game where Alvin Kamara had seen something. He talked to Sean Payton at halftime, and they kind of ran this play where they played their mobility off one another. And I think that's really where you saw that success open up, because they respected the run game. They ran on 62% of plays, and under Winston, it was 31% run plays, 69% passing plays. So evening that out and then using kind of really his dual threat under center, and then adding in the fact that now everyone has to game plan for the fact that he might throw a pass at this point. So they're just kind of leaning into that gadget play, and it worked.
Hey, real quick, I want to go back. You said something interesting about Hill and Kamara running a draw, and they did it 3 times for an average, I think you said, of 12 yards. Was that with both of them in the backfield together?
Yeah, and Hill kept it on 2 of them, and the third one, Kamara kept it. But just the idea that you're not going to think that Dalton's going to keep the ball and take off, and the same really thing with Jameis Winston. But just having that option, it opened it up both for Hill and then Kamara on that last one.
Okay. That's another interesting point. And that's kind of leads me into asking about the game that Pete Carmichael called. Maddie, my opinion as we started the show, and again, this is just my opinion, is that maybe the fact that you went into the week knowing who your quarterback was going to be, that you weren't going to have Mike Thomas, like they were able to formulate a game plan where there wasn't so much uncertainty throughout the week. Did you notice anything that I guess that was notably different in how Pete Carmichael called this game from the previous 4?
Yeah, and that's a good point, too, with their week of actual prep. It seemed a lot less discombobulated. I think, again, another obvious answer is those short throws to Alvin Kamara in space and actually using him for the versatility that he offers. I think he's very much kind of been placed in a box this season, and it kind of happened at the beginning of last season, too. And I was willing to chalk it up then to kind of growing pains between Jameis Winston and Alvin Kamara and getting settled into this offense. But it's really hard to ignore that Dalton is really just willing to take those quick dump-off passes, and he's decisive in doing so. And we saw Kamara run more out routes than we've seen all season. They ran a lot more hitch routes. Chris Olave was successful on 3 of them. They're really just kind of short across the middle of the field, kind of dink and dunk passes that we were used to seeing under Drew Brees, getting the tight ends involved a little bit. And the fact that, they were down Olave, Thomas, and Landry, it almost seemed like the game plan reverted back to those later years of Drew Brees where you need someone to be able to execute the system. But at this point, the system doesn't seem very broken if that was what kind of the result was. I know Seattle's defense is here and there, but they haven't, Carolina's isn't necessarily the best either. And, with Matt Rule just getting fired, it's hard not to look at those earlier games and think if a couple of things had gone differently. But I really think the key is Alvin Kamara being unlocked in space and as a receiving threat.
That was certainly great to see, both as a receiver and a runner for Kamara on Sunday. Maddie Hudec's with us. She's on Twitter at Maddie Hudak _94. Give her a follow. I want to flip it over to defense. Obviously, there's so much good to talk about offensively after a game like that. Defensively, Maddie, when you would come on throughout training camp, damn near every day we talked about how Paulson Adebo was the star of training camp and how he was poised for this huge, and it wasn't just, it was everybody. I mean, that was a consensus thought, and it just has not transferred to the field this year. Is it the injury? What is going on with Paulson Adebo?
Yeah, and then if you look at time of possession for that, too, it was the highest they had all season, with New Orleans actually winning time of possession with 37 minutes. So you can't really use they were exhausted excuse, which I would kind of be willing to give them earlier on. But, yeah, it looks like Adebo just kind of got picked on. I have to think that the ankle has somewhat to do with it, because the majority of those were in man coverage at cover one and against DK Metcalf in man coverage. And that didn't really just seem to make sense to me from a physical perspective. He was just kind of getting pushed off the line of scrimmage. But when they were in zone, more in cover two looks, that's where you saw the middle of the field open, and Tyler Lockett just took absolute advantage of that. But Adebo was lined up on him, and it's those in-breaking routes where they can get picked and there's a little bit of traffic that I kind of pointed it out last week, even though it was more weird, bizarre, cover four off stuff that was going on. The routes that they're finding success on those curl routes, on those, even the deeper routes at this point, are all in breaking across the middle of the field. And Adebo just was losing a lot of foot races. But to kind of continue on the secondary, Marcus May needs to come back, I think, because that, to me, is where everything has kind of seemed to go by the wayside. They only ran 16% of plays in cover one, and that's way lower than we've seen. But they ran a ton of cover two, and I didn't really see Tyrann Mathieu back there. It was a lot of Justin Evans, who he played about half the snaps last week. He was 100% of the snaps this week, 89% of those at safety, and the season average before that was 27% at safety and 32% in the slot. So you have a bunch of guys, I think, just playing kind of out of position at this point, where I think he has the traits of free safety, but he hasn't had the practice time in single high coverage at all. And, Smith kind of smartly, I think, ate that up several times.
So they had Justin Evans effectively replacing Marcus May. Was that the takeaway?
Yeah, and it was after P.J. Williams had kind of been the replacement the week before.
Right. And then P.J. was obviously dealt with the injury this week. I guess I don't even know. Do you have an update on Marcus May? I don't know if there was any talk about that in the press box yesterday or post game.
I haven't really heard anything. And the injury kind of seems like a quiet one that has really seemed to linger, but they're going to need someone back to play Cincinnati. So hopefully we get some clarity on that this week. That's
actually a great transition. Last thing I was going to ask about, I don't know if you've done any film work yet on the Bengals. Do you have any thumbnail preview or ideas of matchups that would be worth watching for Saints and Bengals this weekend?
Trying to think of things specific. You'd think that they would put Lattimore on Jamar Chase, but maybe not. It does worry me because they have Joe Burrow, they have Jamar Chase in that connection. They've kind of showed what their weaknesses are in coverage, and with someone with Joe Burrow and the football IQ he has, that does worry me a bit. Their running game with Joe Mixon, they have a more balanced attack than I think Seattle had. They weren't really getting that far with the run game. It was really those deep passes, and their drives weren't lasting that long. They were just really, really explosive plays, and that's something that you really can't see against Cincinnati, and it's something we really hadn't seen as much as we have up until last Sunday.
And would love to see this defense get healthy. I mean, you mentioned Jamar Chase with Lattimore, and we got to see if Lattimore's how healthy he's going to be with the abdominal injury. I mean, it's just if they keep dropping like flies in that secondary, it's a concern obviously this week and moving forward with what you can see ahead on the schedule. Maddie Hudec, she's on Twitter at Maddie Hudak _94. Be sure to give her a follow. We always appreciate the look at the film and the visit on Monday. Thanks, Maddie.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.